Yeah, we're waiting to hear what the threshold will be for candidates who are actually allowed to stand. How many nominations do you need? In the past, there's been a very low number, a relatively low number, 8 in the last contest. This time, it is being thought that it could go up to maybe 20 or so, and the thinking there is how can they speed up a process? They're very worried that this process could drag on beyond the end of the recess, so they want to do it while the MPs are still here. That's the thing we're watching tonight. But the other thing that's been happening very much around the contest today is that we've seen a contest that was triggered by whole issues over integrity and trust and telling the truth, turn into something more about the political direction. Smaller state, lower taxation. An awful lot of the candidates, it seems at the moment like every single one but Rishi Sunak, offering immediate tax cuts. We've also seen today some candidates facing awkward questions. Nadeem Zahawi, in one interview on Sky, was being asked all sorts of questions about his tax affairs, and the former Health Secretary Sajid Javid didn't seem to want to describe exactly the details of his non-dom status when he'd held it, saying it was before he came into public life. All sorts of stuff like that swirling. Probably the best part of 2 weeks still to go in this contest. We'll know a bit more later, but here's how today went.
My case for leadership is
integrity back.
There were more videos from some leadership contenders to kick off a week that will start the voting and eliminate the no-hopers.
Now that promises
In sweltering temperatures, some leadership contenders took to the podiums. The former Health Secretary, who resigned last week, said the party could be facing an electoral wipeout like the one Tony Blair dealt it a quarter of a century ago.
The British public sent us into the wilderness, and there we were for spending a further 13 years. The way things are going recently, I feared that our party was on a trajectory to the same electoral oblivion once again.
Sajid Javid suggested the magic potion for electoral recovery was immediate tax cuts. And that was also the message in the Churchill war rooms beneath Whitehall, where a Thatcherite think tank welcomed 2 leadership candidates to its relaunch.
As Prime Minister, I will cut the base rate of income tax to 19p in 2023, 18p in 2024. And that will give households back £900 a year on average.
If we believe anything as Conservatives, we believe in low taxes.
A contest that was spawned by questions about Boris Johnson's integrity and truthfulness is for some turning into a moment to reject his broader political approach and his spending habits.
Boris has an inclination of finding a money tree, which of course we said money does not grow on trees.
And this is a moment to grab the party back. Thatcherism's coming home.
In a word, Thatcherism is coming home. And I think what you've seen here today is the reassertion of a set of true core Tory principles.
Rishi Sunak's fast emerging as the only candidate not offering immediate tax cuts. His supporters insist that's for sound economic reasons.
If you speak to most economists, they would say that if you cut tax and that money goes into the economy, then consumption will go up and that will result in inflation rising unless supply increases at the same time.
So what's happened to all these Tory MPs who are going around saying the complete opposite today? Have they lost their head? Are they just pandering to each other in some mad frenzy? What's going on?
I think it's really important that we're having this debate.
Not many good economists would say tax cuts are inflationary. This is a sort of new mythology that's come out of the Treasury. Tax cuts only under very narrow circumstances.
I will set out my vision for
Rishi Sunak's launch video is still being persistently attacked by Tory MPs as far too slick. A dossier circulated attacking him was identified today as the work of one of Priti Patel's long-standing allies. The front runner in these contests, often the one most attacked.
What's important here is you've got 35 or so at the moment we're speaking registered votes for Rishi in favour of the current economic strategy and 130 votes against it.
That, you'd suggest he might look like the front runner, but he might not win?
I think that's entirely likely.
Are we going to actually see Rishi Sunak at some point? Will he put himself up for questioning?
Yeah, absolutely.
He often doesn't. He's got quite a reputation for avoiding scrutiny.
Really? That's not been my impression. I mean, he's
very strong reputation for it, actually.
Well, he's one of the most adept media performers. He did the debates at the last general election when almost none of his colleagues were going to do so.
When are we going to see him?
He's going to launch his campaign later this week, so you've only got a short time to wait.
One of the candidates who was available for interview today rose up the ranks of what's been one of the most successful organising factions in the Conservative Party's history. You're in the European Research Group, the ERG, the people who fought against Maastricht, who made Brexit happen and then shaped Brexit, a phenomenally important section of the Conservative Parliamentary Party. Some people would see it as, if you were to become Prime Minister, that's the final takeover of the party by the ERG.
I wouldn't describe it as a takeover. I mean, we're all Brexiteers now in the Conservative Party, and I would like to think in the country, because that is the course upon which our country is set, irreversibly, I would say.
Successful mission accomplished, what would you
And
call it?
ultimately, I want my party to unite.
What are those funny blacks?
Boris Johnson was visiting a top biomedical research centre. Allies say he's now very hostile to Rishi Sunak. Some worry he might let that show. He clearly hates at least one of the candidates. Is he haunting this contest?
I think that's happened in the past. I mean, you could have said the same thing, 30 years ago about Mrs. Thatcher, and she haunted many subsequent leadership contests as well. She was a larger-than-life character.
We could have that all over again.
But Boris Johnson is a larger-than-life character. He is a one-off. He is unique. So, of course, he's going to dominate things for some time to come.
Your sister, Rachel, said on the radio last night that this was a huge loss for you. She said, I know it's a huge loss for him, a huge loss that's almost like a bereavement.
Well, I did Rake say that. Well, my sister's a wonderful journalist. I think that what I should really concentrate on now, and you're right, you know, I'm doing the last few days, weeks, or however long it is, but the job of government has got to be carried on in that period.
Our leadership has to change.
Penny Mordaunt's launch video had to be hastily re-edited, taking out pictures of a Paralympian who didn't want to be associated with the Tories, also of the convicted Paralympian Oscar Pistorius, and taking out sports footage that has to be paid for.
Can I have a copy there, please? Thank you. Let me show you. My new Conservative economic plan.
Most candidates are trying to distance themselves from a government many of them served in. A contest that was triggered by questions of conduct and integrity. For some now, a moment to change course.
So just so you know what's happening, right now we are waiting for the executive of the 1922 committee of Tory backbench MPs to announce what the process is going to be for the election, when the votes are going to be, the first and second round, and what the threshold is going to be for people to enter that first vote. We are expecting Graham Brady to come out and announce that any time in the next few minutes. But in the meantime, with so many candidates in the mix, you could be forgiven for confusing what they all stand for. Well, to shed a bit of light, our policy correspondent, Paul McNamara, is with me.
Yeah, there's a lot of candidates and a lot of issues, so strap in, it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour. The number one issue, by a country mile, is tax. All bar one of the candidates bending over backwards to tell their colleagues about how they're going to cut tax. Income tax, corporation tax, VAT, it's all getting slashed by someone. The biggest tax cutter of the bunch, current Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi. So today, he's promised to bring down the income tax base rate gradually to 18% by 2024. For 2 years, there'll be no VAT or green levies on energy bills, and a corporation tax rise that was planned will be scrapped, all of which adds up to £50 billion. That's more than the MOD's budget. How is he going to pay for all that? Huge cuts to every government department. 20% cuts for government departments. You can bet the other candidates will be doing their sums on that number. The only candidate saying that they're not going to cut tax, Rishi Sunak, the man who put taxes up to where they are at the moment, outraging many of his colleagues.
Right, so a lot of Tory MPs aren't happy about that.
Yeah, not just not happy about it, they're saying that's the reason why they could never get behind Rishi Sunak. But Mr. Sunak does very well on one other issue, Brexit. He was an ardent Brexiteer right from the get-go, and probably the most high-profile candidate in this race who was a Brexiteer. Most of the other high-profile candidates backed Remain in 2016. Now, of course, they're all bending over backwards to say how they're going to burnish their Brexit credentials. Just this weekend, Tom Tugendhat came out and said he backed the Northern Ireland Protocol legislation. Remember, this was the bill that went through Parliament a couple of weeks ago, which many said broke international law. Well, a couple of weeks ago, Tom Tugendhat abstained from the vote. Now he says he gets behind it. For many hardline Brexiteer MPs, though, they say This isn't enough for them. They don't want someone who's only just seen the light in the last couple of years. They want someone who was Brexit from the beginning.
So what are the other dividing lines?
One last issue that's a big one, culture wars or woke wars, whatever you want to call it. Some candidates have stayed well out of it, some have jumped straight in. Suella Braverman said she will, quote, wage war on woke. Penny Mordaunt, she did a big long Twitter thread making the difference between, quote, biological women and those who are, quote, legally female. And there's Grant Shapps, who said he's staying well clear of these issues. But this is a big deal for grassroots Tory. Ultimately, a lot of candidates, a lot of issues. For many on the right of the party, though, they say it comes down to two factors. Anyone who supported Brexit and anyone but Rishi.
Thanks, Paul. Well, a short time ago, I spoke to Andrea Leadsom and started by asking her why she's supporting Penny Mordaunt.
You know, I've worked with Penny. We came in together in 2010. She is a really smart woman. She's great fun. She's got a great sense of humour. But really importantly, she's really spent her life in service, whether it's in the Royal Navy as a reservist, whether it's caring for her siblings when her mum died when she was very young. She's had a fantastic career. She's got the right sort of approach. She's very, very hardworking, and she's as smart as tax. I think she'll make a great Prime Minister.
But we don't know anything about what she wants to do. I mean, if you go to her website, there is not a single policy on there. I mean, what does she want to do as Prime Minister?
Well, she was obviously a very keen Brexiteer, something we share. She has been absolutely focused as a trade minister on promoting international trade deals. She's been working over the last few months on trade deals with individual member states of the United States of America, which will benefit
for most of that, doesn't she?
Well, you know, there's you know, it is a team effort, but Penny has been absolutely focused on the United States. She's had some real triumphs with getting free trade deals, but she's also very much of a person who promotes free enterprise, firmly believes in the family, the importance of family and in supporting family, but ultimately she is a small state, low tax conservative.
So she would cut tax?
Well, actually, I know that Penny's view is that tax is a bit simplistic to see this leadership campaign as being all about tax. There's a lot more to it than that. And Penny's view is that on the one hand, we need sound finances. On the other hand, we do need to support people and businesses through tough times. But really, where we need to...
So she's not a big tax cutter by comparison to Sajid Javid.
Well, what I'm saying is that Penny absolutely believes in using the levers of government to protect people through tough economic times. But what she really wants to do is to get the engines of growth. She's really promoting economic growth through things like innovation, investment and incentives. Those are the sorts of things that she's really focusing on, and that's where a lot of her policy work is going.
Now, she's come under attack over culture war, really, and the trans issue. She famously said trans women are women, trans men are men, and is now being attacked for that, particularly by Suella Braverman.
Yeah, she was very specifically talking about legal definitions, and she's actually dealt with it very openly. You know, she is a woman, and she absolutely knows what it's like to be a woman. You know, in her time in the Royal Navy, when she's out on manoeuvres, she gets very used to coming in last and carrying the least amount of weight. She knows what it is to be a woman.
But do you still, as a campaign team, say trans women are women?
Well, the point is that a woman is a woman, a biological woman.
Is a trans woman a woman?
A trans woman can be legally a woman, but not biologically a woman. Penny has made that absolutely clear. And as she's also said, you know, we need to be entirely sympathetic and kind and generous to people who feel that they're in the wrong body. But at the same time, Penny has fought for women's rights all her life. She's had a very tough upbringing where she had to nurse her mum through a terminal illness and then to become the mother to her brothers. So she absolutely knows what it is to have caring responsibilities and to fight for women's rights, and she will always do that.
Now, your campaign last time sort of hit the buffers, so I presume you're advising her on what not to do.
Absolutely, of course, yes.
So what's your big advice?
Well, my big advice to Penny, of course, is don't do it twice, because very often the second time round you don't get a look in. But Penny is going to be successful this time. She's not stood before. She backed me in 2016, and she really is a good, solid candidate. This has been something that she's worked on, she's prepared for, she's got a huge amount of support, and I'm absolutely sure she is going to go all the way.
What's the job she's promised you?
We haven't gone into that at all.
Right, but you're expecting
No,
one,
I have
presumably.
no
You're
expectations.
a senior part of
no,
this team.
I have no expectations. I am supporting Penny because I genuinely believe, whilst we have loads of talent in the Conservative Party, I think Penny offers the right combination of warmth, intelligence, a commitment to service, integrity, honour and experience, and that's what the country needs.
Are you going to be leading the procession of what do we want, Mordaunt, when do we want it now?
Why does everyone ask me that? I have no idea. No, that's not happening again. Yeah.
Andrea, let's thank you very much.
Thank you.
3 Tory MPs backing different candidates in this race. George Eustace, who's supporting Grant Shapps, Ben Bradley, who's backing Kemi Badenoch, and Laura Farris, who's supporting Rishi Sunak. And Laura Farris, we've just heard that Penny Mordaunt has come out top in the Conservative Home poll of Conservative members. So it sounds like a weekend of attacks on Rishi Sunak have done the damage.
Well, I think it's very early, Krish. Good evening. To draw any conclusions at this point. There's going to be an awful lot of ebb and flow, I think, over the coming days. I think there has been a bit of a sort of focus on Rishi, but I think it'll be...
They're trying to knock him out, aren't they? I mean, all of these people.
I think there's sort of warm rivalry between us. I don't think it's...
Well, Jacob Rees-Mogg was sort of pretty openly slagging him off last week on Channel 4 News, and Nadine Dorris has had a go at him on Twitter.
Well, that's one or two, but none of them are leadership contenders. And actually, I think he's going to make a really strong recovery from this. And the other thing about Conhome, I would just briefly say, is that's the membership who are online, who are on Twitter. There's a large part of the Conservative Party membership that are not online or regularly using Twitter. I think that probably differs from other political parties that may have more digital engagement.
Do you think there is any problem with his out-of-touch criticism? You know, that he's a fantastically rich man, he's no idea what it's like to live for ordinary people, he's no idea what it's like to go to an ordinary school.
I think it's really easy to say that, Krish, and that overlooks the fact that he was born into a relatively normal household. His mum was a pharmacist and his dad was a GP. Yes, he won a scholarship to a private school. Yes, he excelled after that. He was very successful in his own right, and it's true.
When you say he got a scholarship to a private school,
yes,
they paid fees, didn't they?
Yes.
Yes. So in what way was it a scholarship?
I think he had financial assistance going to that school, and and yes, he's married to a very rich woman, and if that's your criteria, it knocks him out. But I think that's very, very unfair when you look at his own record. Things like what he did when he was implementing the furlough scheme. He worked with the CBI, but he also worked with the TUC, with Francis O'Grady. When he was looking at updates to the national living wage, he worked with the Low Pay Commission. He accepted every single one of their recommendations. He's a collaborative politician who always takes into consideration the people he's making decisions for.
George Eustace, what's wrong with Rishi Sunak?
Nothing's wrong with Rishi, and in fact, as usual in the Conservative Party, we've got a slate of very talented candidates, each with their own strengths.
But why do you prefer Grant Shapps?
Because each of us has to choose the candidate we think would be best to take on that top job at this particular time. Grant Shapps has got a lot of experience. He's worked as a cabinet minister under 3 different prime ministers, and in my 2.5 years around the cabinet table with him, I've really seen him exercise good judgment on some critical moments in Cobra committees, dealing with, the threat to supply chains during COVID, for instance, and as we prepared for a possible no-deal Brexit. I just think he's got good judgment, and he's also a good communicator. He's, in the last couple of years, been the person more than any other who's gone out to bat for the government and done it very, very well. He can tackle whatever's thrown his way.
But if the issue for the Conservative Party is integrity after Boris Johnson, Grant Shapps, who had this alter ego as Michael Green, who wrote books about getting stinking rich, is he really the man to restore credibility for the Conservative Party?
He's dealt with this many times. This was around 30 years ago, by the way, before he came into politics.
No, it wasn't 30 years ago. He was still doing it in 2006, after he came into Parliament.
Well, look, it was a pen name, and it's not unusual for authors.
But he was still doing it when he was an MP.
It's not unusual for authors to have a pen name. I think he's dealt with it.
Have you got Stinking Rich 3?
I haven't.
Maybe we all need Stinking Rich 3, given the state of the economy now.
Look, what I'm actually doing is judging Grant on what I've seen of his judgment around the cabinet table over the last 2.5 years, and every candidate who's come forward in this election has got something that somebody's trying to dump on them and say this is a reason why you can't do it.
And he was writing books about getting stinking rich.
Well,
he's thinking rich?
I don't think he is. I think at the moment his income...
So he didn't know what he was writing about?
Well, he wrote... he had a very successful marketing company and publishing company and printing company, but at the moment his income is the day job, as it were, and that's it. But, that's not a disqualification. I wouldn't hold against Rishi at all, the fact that he might have other income or might have other wealth.
What about Kemi Badenoch, who Ben Bradley here is supporting? I mean, do you think she'd be a great Prime Minister?
Well, I personally, and this is everyone, as I said, has to take an individual choice. I think Kemi Badenoch is a rising star in the party. There's no getting away from that. But I think from where we are now, it's very difficult for somebody who hasn't yet been in the cabinet and has had some limited ministerial to go straight into that.
She wouldn't know what she was doing as Prime Minister, bluntly, would she?
It's not so much that. She's very, very talented, but I think that top job as Prime Minister probably at this stage needs someone with that experience. If you're doing it in opposition and choosing an opposition leader, I think it's a different matter. But look, I'm a huge fan of Kemi. I'm a huge fan of Rishi.
Yeah.
The very important thing, I've done several leadership contests. It's so important that all of the candidates treat one another with dignity and respect.
And they are doing it in public while the teams are massively briefing against each other in private, aren't they?
Well, and your industry,
which
the
Sajid
media,
Javid identified very well today.
Will seize on
it's all
division,
our fault, I'm sure.
Division and attacks of that sort.
Ben Bradley, I mean, is Kemi Badenoch overreaching here? I mean, she's relatively junior, relatively inexperienced. Most people have never heard of her.
I think the fact she's not been embroiled in some of the chaos we've seen in recent months is a good thing. To be honest, I'm all for a fresh start. You mentioned that leadership poll on Con Home. She came second in that behind Penny Mordaunt from a standing start. I think she's really excited the conversation. All these kind of geeky internal Westminster stats, like I think she was 3 of the top 5 articles on The Spectator of people saying why she was the right answer to the country's problems. It's very internal Westminster, but it's clearly sparked some interest from this place and from the outside world.
I mean, isn't there a problem though with the way this selection is going in terms of the electorates? Because the first electorate is Tory MPs, the debate is all about tax cuts, because there are so many Conservative MPs who want tax cuts. And what you're being criticised for in some quarters is you're not talking about what you're going to spend the money on. Levelling up seems to have gone right out the window.
Well, from my perspective, Kemi's pitch has been it's notionally come on to tax cuts because the conversation has led there from other places. But Kemi laid out a real pitch about values, actually, and about what government is for. We got into a tax cuts conversation because she said we need to really re-examine what government is about, what its relationship with people is, because you can only deal with those tax cuts or rises if you actually say, what is government for? Is government overreaching in many spaces? She talked about the online harms bill, for example, this week, and the changes she would make to that to stop government meddling in spaces around things like free speech that it shouldn't be meddling in. So we've really got to get back to examining that conversation. I think Kemi's the only one, in my view, brave enough to stand up and have that real fundamental conversation about what we're about.
Is this government getting meddling too much? I mean, you're in the cabinet. Do you sit there in cabinet saying government's too involved, we need a smaller state?
Look, what we actually need is, yes, less regulation in many areas, and leaving the European Union's a great opportunity to switch off and simplify many bodies of law which were poorly drafted, frankly. But there are also, areas where we do need, strong government leadership and the right type of regulation.
So how much change do we need?
Well, we've got a manifesto that everybody was elected on, and that manifesto remains the guide for the Conservative Party. What we've got to do is deliver what was in that manifesto and demonstrate we can tackle new challenges, like all of these problems as we come out of the pandemic. And if we can get that right, and a new leader can get that right, we'll be in a much stronger position.
I know you've got to go and vote, so if you two want to go, let me just give you a last word. I mean, is Rishi Sunak the continuity challenge? Candidate? Is he the one who delivers the manifesto?
Well, I think we do need to still deliver the manifesto. The reasons why we're having this leadership contest is because of personal issues to do with the Prime Minister, not political issues. You were talking about the promises of tax cuts and uncosted tax cuts, and one of the things
which he calls fairy stories.
Well, one of the things that Rishi hasn't done is make promises that he can't deliver on. He's aware, we are probably the biggest challenge facing the country at the moment is economic, and he's the one who has shown the most leadership. He's had his head under the bonnet of the British economy for the last 2 years, and when he just became Chancellor, he was faced with an enormous economic crisis, and I think he really shone, and I think he was really imaginative and showed real ability in the way that he adapted to meet the needs of the pandemic.